Kia ora from New Zealand. My name is Deckert. I'm an associate professor in criminology at Auckland University of Technology. We all know that Australia, Canada, New Zealand and the United States mass incarcerate Indigenous people. In the US, Indigenous people are actually the second most incarcerated social group. When I attended international conferences, I heard a lot about African and Hispanic Americans, but little about Indigenous people. Also, I heard many white academics talk about Indigenous people without them having spoken to an Indigenous person. Most seem content to base their findings on statistics, court documents, and coroner reports. So I wanted to find out three things. 1. How much importance does criminology place on the mass incarceration of Indigenous people? 2. How much of the research is done with instead of just on Indigenous people? And 3. How do criminologists talk about Indigenous people? To answer these questions, I looked at over 20,000 research studies published in high-ranked criminology journals over the last 20 years. So what did I find? First, criminology as a whole pays sufficient attention to the mass incarceration of African and Hispanic Americans, but not to the mass incarceration of Indigenous peoples. Second, in general, criminologists center the voices of people, and that holds also true for research with African and Hispanic Americans, but not for the research on Indigenous people. Finally, only half of studies categorized Indigenous people as such. The other half used categories like ethnic, other, and non-white. I hope that my findings will inspire more academics to pay attention to the mass incarceration of Indigenous peoples, to center Indigenous voices, and to acknowledge Indigenous peoples' unique relationship to land by ditching the categories ethnic, other, and non-white.